Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. So why are all the churches maintaining variations of the same lie? Well, part of it is cultural. But what is Western culture based on, right? You had the Roman Caesars, the feudal lords. It was very barbaric, right? No offense to anybody, but I'm sure you can all agree that mainstream history and historians themselves point out that Western culture was so barbaric that the Romans labeled the other European groups as barbarians, right? It was barbarian territory for the most part, at least. Okay? These people plundered each other. Like, for example, when you look at Africa before colonialism, it was nowhere near as violent. When the West came there with their guns and their drugs and all the problems and their psychology, by the time they were done, it was a very violent place. When they came to America, lots of Native Americans died. When they went to India, lots of Indians died. When they went to China, opium war. So, to understand why the churches are lying, we must understand, well, where do they come from? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Right? They're in the Roman tradition, right? The Protestants branched out from the Romans, and you had the Eastern Empire and the Roman Empire, and you had the kind of other empire, right? The Western Empire, right? Byzantines and so on the East, if I'm not mistaken, and you had the Western Roman Empire. And they were basically like a bunch of greedy Romans splitting the pie. No offense to anybody. These are the facts. So the church's beginnings, whether it's Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, is from that. And Martin Luther was a very suspicious character, to say the least. He went straight to the rich German royalty for backing, and they backed his cause. And that same kind of feudalistic, barbaric tradition that they held dear to their heart, okay, spread like wildfire, and lots of religious wars occurred, and they were basically like Roman wars. At one point there was a brothel in the Vatican. There's letters from the Pope where at least one letter where they talk about, where he talks about how it's a racket, that the church is a racket. They take in a lot of money. They buy up a lot of property. Okay. People like Mormons, they give people jobs for joining their churches. Okay. People turn to the church for help financially, historically. And the church was like acting like a business and a cult. Okay. The whole Western culture was full of what they used to call a snake oil salesman. People who lie to you and get you to do it their way. So this is part of the proof that I'm Christ, right? Part of it is the process of elimination with the proof that I'm Christ. Okay, so we know that no bad tree bears good fruit. It's in the Bible. Every single church that you have is a bad tree. And they've never bore good fruit. I brought this up before with Martin Luther King, okay? He's somebody who comes from my tribe and from years and years of cultivating an Igbo way about him. Okay? And then, the slavery occurred, what have you. He was like the rose that grew in concrete because it's not from the concrete. Okay? And they tried to assimilate him and it didn't quite work. Kind of gene expression, right? You go enough generations, every gene expression is going to be evil. Right? But you go, there's a couple hundred years or so, what's going to happen is one might slip through the cracks still. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that the Igbos are good and everyone else is bad, okay? Because the whole world is led astray. The Bible has that right. Satan leads the whole world astray. I'm the last valid leader ever. And that's part of the proof as well. But you need to understand why the people who point the finger are wrong. Most people get right away the atheists aren't very honest as a group, right? They're people with a complex, people mad because maybe they're gay, maybe they're feminists, and we see that, right? They kind of group together on the left for the most part. They have a complex. They're not honest. We see the LGBT community, okay? As a group, right? Some are very nice as individuals, but as a group, they're not honest. They're coarse like every other group, every community in America. In fact, every community on the planet is coerced into submission to evil. That's why the broad is the way to destruction, narrow is the way to life. You see what I'm saying? So it is rather disingenuous, intellectually dishonest to pretend that the people who might point the finger at me magically are experts. That's just not the case. They're experts in deceit and evil. They know they've conformed to a system of white supremacy, a system of kleptocratic, right? Thieves, right? The oligarchs, criminal governing class people. They know that they have conformed to the military-industrial complex. Quite often there's American flags flying in churches. They know they've conformed. They know they found their life in the world. They know they follow the devil's rules, and their conduct reflects that. Even if you never heard of child molestation in the churches, and it's not just Catholics, mind you, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that they are not doing God's work. So obviously they're doing something wrong. And part of it, a huge part of it, one could argue the whole part of it, is philosophy. What do they believe? What is the spirit? Their spirit is deception. The parable of the barren fig tree. It doesn't bear any fruit. He said if it doesn't bear any fruit soon, cut it down and throw it in the fire. They've never borne any fruit. They've just taken credit for what other people have sown. Other groups. Pretty straightforward. So, when people would say, okay, anyone, basically they know I've proven it, right? Because I've pointed to the martial arts, other people haven't. I pointed to moral precision, other people point to social norms, and then they play a straw man game. They play a social norm contract. They try to find someone who's more of a social norm fanatic than they are, if such a thing is possible. Then they point to them, and they say, those guys are worldly, not me. That's like Freddy Krueger pointing at Jason Voorhees, saying he's the evil demon bad guy, not me. Stupid, right? And so it is with, say conservatives. They'll try to point to Black Lives Matter or Antifa and act like they have the moral high ground. Hell, Donald Trump does the same thing. And most people would agree at this time that Donald Trump is somewhat of a crook. Again, no offense to anybody. These are the facts. I would go as far as to say that most Republicans, if they were being honest at the time, would admit that they believe that Donald Trump is a crook. Bad business dealings, sexually immoral speech, conversations while he's trying to run for president and be an idol for the kids. He agrees a criminal. All politicians are criminals. I was watching some conservative guy give a sermon on YouTube, and he said that politicians are historically against the prophets. You got that right. A politician is a demon. A prophet is supposed to tell the truth about God. And those demons want you to lie about God. But what he failed to mention is he's attached himself to the Republican Party, and that it's a group that's led by politicians. His propaganda was given to him by the crooked governing class and the politicians. That's who leads him. The rich and the politicians, who may or may not be so rich. They usually are rich. Pretty straightforward. That's the hypocrisy. They try to find somebody who's more obviously crooked than they are, and they point to them. It's the wolves in sheep's clothes, blaming the wolf who's a little less in sheep's clothes or who's in wolf's clothes. So when we look at the history of Western barbarism, Western cultural appropriation, look at martial arts, for example. Look at MMA. It springs up from the West after, in its modern form at least, after there's a bunch of American martial arts studios, right? American Taekwondo, American Karate. American Ninja, Kung Fu the Legend, David Carradine. All BS, right? All shallow, kind of Disneyland, kind of circus arts. Look at MMA these days, right? UFC. When it first started, they were a little bit more serious. Now it's just straight clowning. It's straight homosexual clowning. No offense to the LGBT community, but I have to tell the truth about everything. Especially now that we're approaching the end. The end of my flesh, Eventually my flesh will be dead and my soul will be with God, and I'll be at God's right hand. So when we look at the Bible, one of the key parts of this is the hand of the Lord. Like in Isaiah 30, in Isaiah in general, Isaiah 5. God's hand is upraised and it strikes them down. And he's striking them down, and he's not finished. He strikes them down some more and some more and some more. Okay? Another thing that conservative preacher was right about is he said the world is getting more and more evil. I've been saying this for years. Isaiah 57, the righteous are taken away, therefore the world's being more evil. There's no hope. You shouldn't reproduce. Paul said in his letters, don't reproduce. But if you can't help it, then get married. But now we're at a time where people can get their tubes tied. Do not have children no matter what. And if you can help it, if you can contain your lust in your sinful state, don't have sex. When Jesus is being shunned by attractive women, the righteous person doesn't need to be told to not have sex, unless he can secure that for the King of Kings, a suitable helper, not settling, not gay, but divinely just and suitable helper in complete submission. Why? Because more than just me having sex. It's what it represents. It's a sign of the times. The most righteous person that ever lived can't get a date. What is the value of females? What is the value of the churches? And who married you? The devil himself? Because that's who the churches serve. Pretty straightforward. And Lord forbid you bring into a family into this world. Heartbreaking. People don't want to go there because they don't understand Proverbs. Better is open rebuke than love that is concealed. They don't understand the Bible. You know them by their fruits. And the Bible also talks about the fruit of your womb, not just your deeds and your works. Pretty straightforward. So what you should take away from this video is that the West is not exerting the power of God. Neither is the East, Russia, China. Neither is any African nation as a nation. It's just me. I'm the only one bringing the power of God and striking them down. Write this down because I want you all to understand this. Jesus exists in principle, right? The Spirit of Christ, okay? Christ's soul. It's principle and spirit. And, you can only prove that you're Christ with principle. And all victories are in principle. Like they said in Egypt, right? It was Horus with the principles of good versus Set with the principles of evil. And the West worships Set in the form of Jupiter and Zeus in Greece. And that spread, right? That idea, that philosophy, those cultures spread to the rest of the European countries through the Roman Empire. They went from a certain type of barbarian to kind of Zeus and Set heavy barbarians. And it's right there on the Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel where they depict God as the demon Baal, aka Zeus, aka Jupiter, aka Set. Okay, it's like a family, it's a cult family, and a bunch of cults that were in the same spirit that spread to different places. And the ones who spread to Greece took on the name Zeus, right? The ones who spread to Rome took on Jupiter. In the Middle East, it was Baal. The ones in Africa, where almost certainly it begins, were Set. He was called the deity of foreigners because it was so well understood that he spread to different places that were foreign to Egypt. And as southern Egypt was seen as righteous, northern Egypt was seen as wicked. Well, how do I know? Because Nechin was in southern Egypt. Because Egypt was civilized from southern Egypt. And Narmer, who followed Horus, united it from southern Egypt. So you have to look at history, right? You know them by their works. What's the good tree, right? The good tree is the righteous people who inspired the idea of Horus, right? The Igbo tribe, and there's certain members of it. Because, there's always bad apples, right? The wicked were the people who went around the world colonizing and raping and killing everybody. Jesus himself said he went to the sick, right? You don't give the healthy a doctor. And where did his disciples go? They went to Europe. They immediately started traveling into Europe. Why is that? Because they wanted to face the lion in his lair. They wanted to face the devil in his home turf. And I'm not being racist here. I'm part white. These are the facts. From a black patriarchal line, but I'm not racist. If it was the other way around, I'd say it was the other way around. The main people spreading Satanism in an organized and calculated and the most ruthless form historically were Westerners. England, France, Spain, Portugal, Germany. So Zeus is said to change shape including into jackals when you combine it with Set. But the rape of Europa is about a bull, right? Zeus changes shape into the form of a bull, and Baal is associated with bulls. It's also there with the wordplay. It's a story for another day.